Croeso friends, welcome to Opus L&I, where we participate in online conferences. Welcome also to the Costume Symposium. I hope everyone is having a wonderful time and soaking up all of the amazing content that Costume is putting out this weekend. Thank you to everyone who helped make this event possible. To Muse and Dionysus, who took point on graphics, to Marianne, who ran the social media accounts, to V, Mariska, and everyone else who managed scheduling, to Tiffany, Shoshi, Mia, and all of the other badge fairies, to Faye, Lena, Kate, and everyone else moderating the Discord server, and to everyone who organized an Instagram event. You are all rock stars, and the amount of work everyone has put into the symposium has been staggering. So everyone go grab a cuppa. I am drinking Hoth tea from Tabletop Teas today because it has mint in it, and I am in for a bunch of talking. Let's get into it. Last year for CocoVid, I made a video on building a medieval capsule wardrobe. Everyone seemed to like it, and I had the idea of expanding the video into a series, but somehow never quite got around to it over the last year. But I thought I would reprise the concept this year for Cozy and make a video on building a Viking capsule wardrobe. For those of you who may not be familiar, a capsule wardrobe is a small fixed number of clothing pieces that can be mixed and matched to make a bunch of different outfits, like our animals. Having fewer pieces of clothing designed to be worn together keeps outfits feeling fresh in a community where there is sometimes pressure to never wear the same outfit twice, while also keeping the size of your wardrobe small enough to not be overwhelming. You can extrapolate this concept out to a complete closet planning or focus it down to planning what to pack for an event that is just a week or two long. I'm sure it will be no surprise to any of my repeat viewers that I want to make this video as inclusive as possible. Reconciling the recreation of a highly gender-binaried European past with the reality of modern genderqueerness isn't always easy, but we're going to try our best. I will be using the terms masculine and feminine to differentiate the styles of clothing that would have been worn by Scandinavian people in the Viking Age. This is in no way meant to indicate that clothing is gendered. So what exactly is the Viking Age? It's the period of time from roughly 750 to 1050 CE when people from Scandinavia turned their attention outward to raid, colonize, conquer, and trade with just about all of Europe, as well as places as far away as the Mediterranean, North Africa, Byzantium, and even North America. Because of the overlap in timeline and geography, we will see several similarities with the generic medieval wardrobe I put together last year. But there are a fair few differences as well, and we will see those as we get further along. It's also worth a note that we have relatively few extant garments available for study. The soil of Northern Europe is inimical to textile preservation. So we have some garment fragments, some carvings and other pictorial evidence, and some textual clues from sources like the prose and poetic Eddas, and written observations of people that the Vikings encountered. All of this is to say that a lot of the Viking clothing people make today is conjectural at best, but that's not going to stop us from conjecturing with the best of them. As with all eras, foundation garments are incredibly important, and we will be starting our wardrobes with those. Plain undyed linen undergarments that could stand up to more frequent laundering kept body oils and sweat from getting on the more expensive, less easily washable outer garments. You can have just one set of these, but I generally recommend several, especially if you're planning this wardrobe for a multi-day event such as Pennsic or another SCA war. If you're someone who does heavier labor or fighting, you may find that you need a set of undergarments a day, or two should you choose to change after you cool down. If you exert yourself less or the event is in a cooler climate, you may be able to reuse your undergarments after a day of airing and perhaps a spritz of an alcohol-based linen spray. Since I started off my medieval wardrobe with feminine clothing, I thought I'd flip it this time. Since I didn't get a chance to sew my partner a Viking Capsule wardrobe this year, I'll be relying on some digital paper dolls I made of him, but I will show some actual examples at the end of this section. The undergarments we'll be looking at are a shirt and braise. The thigh-length shirt is made of plain linen with long sleeves and is cut fairly close to the body so it fits easily underneath the outer clothing layers. Braise serve as underwear and are generally similar to modern boxers. On the upper body would be worn a tunic, a loosely fitting knee-length shirt made from rectangles with triangular gores inserted to give fullness to the hem. These long-sleeved garments would generally have been made from wool, but where I live in Texas, a lot of people choose to make them from linen for temperature regulation purposes. Tunic necklines varied from region to region. They could be rounded, keyhole, or even have a vertical slit opening from one side of the neckline. They were generally trimmed with thin strips of silk for the very rich, or finely tablet-woven bands at the neck and sleeve openings. As a quick aside, I want to address the propensity among some groups, most notably the SCA, to make over-tunics with elbow-length sleeves. There isn't any archaeological or pictorial evidence to support this stylistic choice, so if you're looking to create as historical an impression as possible, maybe give this a pass. However, if you're not going for the highest ever of historical accuracy, making a short-sleeved tunic to wear over your long-sleeved one, or even just your shirt, can be a great way to add another dimension to your kit. Just double-check your group's priorities before you commit to it. Generally speaking, I'd try to have 3 differently colored tunics in your closets, either 3 long-sleeved ones or 2 with long sleeve and 1 with short. Remember that you can refresh these items in between wearing by hanging them to air out overnight. Once we've taken care of the upper body, it's time to turn our attention to the lower. Here's where things start to differ from the rest of Europe. You may remember from last year that medieval masculine types wore chausses or thigh-high hose tied to the waistband of their brace. And that's still an option. However, the Vikings actually did have trousers in a couple of different styles. First up, we have the Hedeby trousers, also called Haibathu, Type 2, or Roos pants. They are trousers that are full and baggy to the knee, where they are either gathered to a cuff or bound more closely to the lower leg with strips of cloth. We'll get to that in just a bit. The extant scraps of the Hedeby trousers aren't quite enough to give us a proper idea, but there are several textual references to high breeches in the Icelandic sagas, as well as from the writings of Persian traveler Ibn Rusta, who described the full trousers of the Rus he encountered. There are also several pictorial examples from Scandinavian sources of people wearing tunics with full blousey trousers. And if those are not quite to your taste, there are the Type 1 Thorsberg style trousers, also recovered from Hedeby. This style of trousers are much less common in reenactment circles, and honestly, it's probably because they're more complicated and harder to fit. They have a slimmer profile cut quite closely to the leg, with a complex rectangular geometry that's still hotly debated because the evidence is so fragmented. The legs terminate in built-in feet, much like the hosen styles of the rest of Western Europe, and the waistband features belt loops. I would recommend 2 different pairs of trousers or hosen, whether those are in the same style in different colors or 2 different styles to change up your silhouette. If you were feeling very adventurous, you could have 1 set of each style. Regardless of which trouser situation one might find themselves in, the lower legs of all masculine people would have been wrapped with strips of woolen fabric about 4 to 5 inches wide and about 10 feet long, called winnegas. They wrapped the calf from just below the knee to ankle and could be secured by being folded and tucked into the other wraps, or with small metal hooks. Winnegas are very similar to 20th century puttees. Puties? I'm not actually sure how to say that. Protecting the lower legs from scratches and snags of walking through thick underbrush. As far as headwear, a coif may have been worn by Vikings. We see them on the Bayeux Tapestry, although that is the very tail end of the age. There is evidence for coifs at finds from Jorvik and Dublin, although they are shaped differently from the sort of aviator style of medieval coif that is so common in manuscripts in the later centuries. We have more evidence for simple woolen pillbox hats and hoods, like the Skjoldaham hood that I made in earlier periods. And last of all, no good Viking would be without a cloak. Instead of the swirling round capes fastened at the throat we're also used to seeing in medieval movies and Lord of the Rings, Viking capes were shorter and rectangular, more like blankets, and generally fastened at the shoulder of the dominant hand with a straight ring pin. Sometimes they might have a decorative fringe at the shorter edges. Here are a couple examples of Viking clothing worn by friends of mine in the SCA. This is my friend Liam, showing off a plainer, more historical silhouette, and this is my friend Raffen, who actually has a YouTube channel where he talks about period games, and he has a new video premiering today, so make sure you check that out. A link in the cards and the description. On to the feminine side of the closet. For undergarments, we'll be needing a plain linen smock, long sleeved and falling between knee and ankle length. These are also designed to be an easily washed and changed barrier between body and clothing. I recommend having several to switch out daily. No reliable evidence of any kind of nether region undergarment exists during the Viking Age. It's likely that hosen, or tall socks made from bias cut woven fabric coming to just above the knee and fastened with garters, would also be worn. They were a staple in other feminine European closets. Archaeological evidence supports the presence of hosen in Scandinavian wardrobes, but doesn't point to them being worn exclusively by one gender over another, so it's reasonable to surmise that all genders wore them. The staple of the feminine Viking closet is the simple, rectangularly constructed dress, similar to the loose gown worn throughout the rest of Europe. These dresses were generally long-sleeved and made from wool or linen, and necklines could be quite varied, with rounded, scooped, and keyhole necklines all being possibilities. Some of the front keyhole slits were quite long and fastened with brooches, presumably for breastfeeding purposes. These dresses could be worn as a complete outfit unto themselves or as a base layer underneath an apron dress. The apron dress is the quintessentially Viking feminine garment. It's what everyone thinks of when they think of Vikings. At its most basic, it's a tubular garment held up by shoulder strap loops, long in the back and short in the front, that fasten by means of metal domed brooches. There are a lot of different speculations about how these garments could be shaped, whether they are fitted or loose at the torso, whether they flare at the skirt, or are completely straight the whole way down. There are a few different silhouettes that are common in reenactment circles, the most prevalent one being a dress that is reasonably fitted through the torso and flaring out into a full skirt by the insertion of gores. I would recommend having at least 2 of the long sleeved dresses, or even 3 if the event is long, and 2 apron dresses to maximize versatility. 2 of each will result in 6 discrete outfits available. Let me pause for a second and reiterate that archaeological evidence for feminine clothing especially is pretty thin on the ground. We have fragments that were preserved by proximity to the metal brooches and some pictorial and textural evidence that gives us some parameters, but the shape and cut of dresses are pretty much speculative. We're all just trying our best with the limited information we have available. As far as outerwear, there are a couple of different options available. One of those is a coat like the one I made a little while ago based on a find in Birka. It's an A-line full-cut coat that fastens at the front chest with a brooch. The other option is a shawl, a smaller version of the rectangular cloak that we see in masculine closets. These shawls may have been square instead of rectangle and could have been fastened at the shoulder with a pin or folded in half to make a triangular shape. And lastly, in terms of headwear, there are a couple of different options as well. Firstly, a simple kerchief that can be worn in several different ways. Knotted at the back, tied or pinned at the nape of the neck, or draped more like a veil. It's also possible that the coifs and hood mentioned above could have been worn by people who dressed in a feminine way. There are also mentions of other kinds of headdresses in the sagas, more structured metal affairs, but honestly we have no real evidence as to how those might have looked or been worn. Here is the full extent of a capsule wardrobe consisting of shifts, hosen, 2 dresses, 2 apron dresses, a shawl, a coat, and a couple of miscellaneous accessories such as headscarves and an apron. As you can see, there are many different configurations available. Accessories and shoes are the final things to cap off our wardrobes, masculine and feminine alike. Shoes would have been constructed by the turn shoe method, where the leather soles and uppers are sewn together inside out and then turned. There is evidence for both low shoes and ankle boots, fastened by ties or buttons, and both styles were worn by all genders. There is more evidence for belts in the masculine closet, but there are still a fair number of grave finds at Birka that suggest that belts were a part of the feminine wardrobe as well. Like I mentioned earlier, apron dresses were fastened at the front with matching brooches, so those are a pretty integral part of the feminine wardrobe. And often there were decorative festoons strung between those brooches, strands of lampwork or clay beads, or in some places closer to the Baltic Sea, decorative chains. Necklaces and bracelets were also worn with feminine clothing, but necklaces weren't usually worn with masculine clothing. All genders wore brooches and pins to fasten clothing and outer garments. Thank you for coming along with me, friends. I hope this has been a good addition to my capsule wardrobe series, and I hope it's helped you consider the benefits of a capsule wardrobe. If you're interested in snagging the badge for this video, make sure to fill out the Google form I've linked in the description box below, and the fairies will get that added to your Badger account post-haste. Do please check out all of the other cozy videos and events that are happening over the course of the rest of this weekend, and be sure to catch the 2 live panels that I'll be taking part in on Sunday. The medieval and early period costuming panel will be here on this channel at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. British Summer Time. And then you can also find me in the Renaissance costuming panel over on Daisy Victoria's channel at 12 noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. British. If you liked this video, please be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell if you haven't already. Quick reminder that as soon as I hit 5,000 followers, I will be giving away these 18th century anatomical heart pockets. I upload every other Friday. If you would like to find me on other social media, I am Opus LNI everywhere. All of those links will be down in the description box below, along with a link to my Ko-fi if you would like to shop for a little something or just support Production Assistant brand directly. And I will also make sure to include the information for my next event, the SDF Tournament of Defense, which is coming up in November. As always, friends, be kind, do the work, continue supporting marginalized people, and keep creating. Quill!